Welcome. Now, this week's Torah portion is Parshas Naso, and Parshas Naso is the second Torah portion in the book of the Midbar, the book of Numbers, and we're going to continue the counting of the tribe of Levi. We said at the beginning that the Jewish people were counted as a whole, all the tribes except for tribe of Levi, which the tribe of Levi is given a separate status because of their dedication to God Almighty and not participating in the sin of the golden calf. So therefore, they have a special role in being the stewards of the Holy Tabernacle, which later on became the Holy Temple in the Holy City of Jerusalem and the Holy Land. And so the Torah portion this week begins with the word, or the word that it's not the first word of the Torah portion, but it's the word that is used as the name of the Torah portion. It says, "Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor Naso es Reish b'nei Gershon." Begins to discuss the next clan of the Levites, and the word uses Naso. Naso means to raise up the head, literally, of the children of Gershon. And then what that really means is, well, the way we understand that to mean is it means to take a census. But here's the key thing over here that we want to emphasize. The Torah is emphasizing that it doesn't say count these people, but it says raise up their head. So there's two things that we can learn from this. One is that the reason we don't count people is because counting people is just a number. We're not interested in numbering people. We're not interested in the numbers of people per se, but rather being able to recognize the advantage, the offering, the uniqueness of every single individual. So really what we're doing in God's command to Moses to do this counting is to elevate each person to bring out to the forefront his unique individuality, raise up his head, raise up him into a higher level. That is what is being asked of us at this time and of this counting of the members of the tribe of Levi. Now, this applies to us in all our lives. We have to recognize that God's call to us is really to lift us up. And this also relates to another meaning we can understand from lift up the heads of the children of Gershon, is that our job is to stand as upright human beings. So it's not sufficient to say, okay, I'm just going to go through life. I have to lift up my head and I have to be able to see that which is true, and then to live accordingly so that I have both an intellectual understanding. I both understand what the Torah has to say, what God's divine wisdom is, and also take actions accordingly that I'm going to conduct myself according to God's will. And that's why every time there's a Torah portion, the name is of significance in us learning something in the service of God Almighty, and something that we can apply in our practical everyday lives. So then the Torah continues. This is chapter 4, the book of Numbers. And we have over here, God tells Moses to take a census of the clan of Gershon, and from the ages of 30 to 50, because that's the age for service in the temple and the service of carrying the elements of the tabernacle from location to location and setting it up and so forth. And then in verse 29 is also a command to count the third clan of the tribe of Levi is the clan of Merari. These are the ones that have to carry all the pillars and the planks and so forth. So then in verse 34, God continues with a command. Well, it tells us now what's the tally. The tally of the people according to the first family, the first clan was 2,750. The tally of the clan of Gershon was 2,630. And the tally of the clan of Merari was 3,200. So this is not all the people that there were from each one of those families, because this is only the men between the age of 30 and 50. So then there's also all the males from birth to the age of 30, and then from 50 and above. And then there's also corresponding the women. So that the total tally of the Levites between the ages of 30 and 50 was 8,580. So then in verse 2 of chapter 5 comes the command about purifying the camp and maintaining so people are, for example, have the skin condition that we talked about before. I was actually just learning with somebody today that the connection between the brain cells, the development of the brain cells, the development of the skin and the nerves. And the interesting thing is that the skin is really connected to the brain in terms of its development from the type of cells, and those cells maintain a connection. So it's interesting that tsaras, the skin condition, is directly a result of a person's from someone's thinking process. If they're thinking divisive thoughts that are negative about other people, and then bringing that into speech, this is something that's going to be reflected in their skin. And then also talking about different things that bring a person, for example, contact with the dead, that brings a person to a state of spiritual impurity, and describing exactly where each one of each is meant to be, where he's able to come in the different camps within the Jewish people, which camps he's able to come to. And also, there's a command over here in verse 3 that it requires the establishment of actual proper hygiene in terms of bathrooms. Has to be latrines set up outside the camp. Then in verse 5, it brings about the results of having theft. If a person steals money, and the obligation to pay it back with a surcharge, and if the person has no heirs if the victim was a convert with no heirs and he died since the crime, then the thief must pay the priests instead, the kohanim instead. So these are the obligation to pay restitution. Then in verse 9 brings the different kohanim, the priests have different entitlements to different parts of the things that are brought as offerings, and that it goes through the details of that over there. Now in verse 13 comes the situation of a woman who's suspected of being unfaithful to her husband, God forbid, and it says over here that the word verse 12. So it says here in verse 12, should any man's wife stray from what is modest behavior, and then he sees her behaving immodestly with another man, then he has to warn her to refrain from being in this man's company. Now, immodest behavior means even being in seclusion with another man. And if he suspects that she was unfaithful to him, then there's a process here by which she has to drink what's called the waters of the Seta in order to clarify what her status is. Now, the word in Hebrew over here for tiste, for a woman straying, is a word that means, it can be understood to mean folly. And what we learn out from this is that a person does not get involved in any type of immorality unless they have a spirit of folly that comes into them. And really what's the spirit of folly is the time when we forget who we really are. That's what the spirit of folly is. When we start to believe that there are things in the world that are more important to us than our connection to God Almighty, then that's what's called the spirit of folly. If you were to calmly speak to any human being and say, what's the right thing to do? Everyone would say what the right thing to do is. So how is it possible that a person who professes to do the right thing and professes to know the right thing, that all of a sudden they would go ahead and do something that's not acceptable? So the only way that it's possible if a spirit of folly comes into a person. So we all know from personal experience, when we know that we're not supposed to do something and then we go ahead and do it, what was going through our heads at the time? So it was just foolish thoughts. Foolish thoughts, either we were upset or thought we weren't getting something we deserved or something that we needed. And these are all thoughts that are the spirit of folly. And they don't never end up. Is if we understand that a person has an animal soul, and the animal soul is constantly coming to kind of barrage him or her to go and do things that are more on the animal spectrum of things, unnecessary things, meaning to say we all need to eat, but things that are beyond the scope of what's necessary. So we might say to ourselves, well, you know what, it's a pretty bleak possibility of being able to do the right thing, because this animal soul is always pushing at us to go and do something that's unnecessary and that could be harmful to us. So the answer is not really a great battle at all, because if we're to recognize and to keep in the forefront who we are, and that God Almighty is giving us the power in every situation to come out with the upper hand, meaning to say our divine orientation always has the ability to have the upper hand, to such an extent that divine orientation is so powerful, it's not even possible for the animal soul to ever even get the upper hand. How does the animal soul ever succeed in gaining an upper hand over us, that we wake up one morning and wake up, after the fact and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that? It's only because at that moment in time that we lost sight of the fact that God Almighty is giving us the power, the unbeatable power to do the right thing in every time and every situation. So the end result is that where is the real Avera? Avera means going away. Avera means to cross over. Aver means to cross over. Where's the real crossing over from doing God's will to doing something that's not according to God's will, that's not good for us? What we would call a sin, the missing the mark, the word in Hebrew for sin is chet. The missing the mark, when a person misses the mark, it's not because the arrow, he's going to shoot an arrow. What really happens? So if you take an archery course, you'll learn that there's 5 things that you need to do. And if you do them correctly, then you will always hit the mark. Okay. One is you have to have the right body posture, to position your hands correctly. You have to hold the bow correctly. You have to have the arrow in the correct position and hold the string in the correct position. There's five simple steps. So now we're going to take, for example, if you have like a massive wind that comes along all of a sudden, but generally speaking, there's no winds coming along all of a sudden. You know what the speed of the wind is, and a professional archer is able to actually calculate the speed of the wind, the direction of the wind into his aim. Now, what happens is that if the arrow misses the mark, that's a reflection on something that happened much earlier. In fact, it's a reflection on something that happened before the arrow actually left the bow. That's where the problem started. But the problem actually started even before this setup. The problem was in the archer's thinking, because the archer skipped one step in the process of the setup of the proper posture and the proper 5 elements that need to be in place for an accurate shot of the arrow. Something in his thinking skipped a step. He decided to skip a step. He decided to maybe be impatient or be sloppy. Something was going wrong in his thinking. So now when we see the arrow and we look at the bullseye and we see that the arrow missed the bullseye, it's on the side somewhere, too high, too low, too far to the right, too far to the left. The shot went bad in the archer's thinking. That's where the problem went wrong. So we call the missing the mark a chet, a sin. But the sin is not so much, it's a problem that he missed the mark. We're not taking away from the problem that he missed the mark. He's supposed to hit the mark and he missed the mark. But the real problem is in the thinking of the archer. That's where the problem has to be addressed. So that's why the other word for a chet, a sin, is avera. Avera means going over, meaning a person's thinking is going over from the side of the certainty of the knowledge that God Almighty is giving him the strength to do the right thing at every time and every place. And his thinking now goes over to a place where he opens up the possibility that something else could have influence on the shot he's going to take. Maybe to say he's now has to, the next breath, he has to take an action. And he is allowing in a thought that maybe there is another power within his reality that's able to overcome him and take control of the steering wheel, so to speak. So if you see that the person now crashes and he did something in life that is now causing him problems, the real problem started in his thinking. Because if his thinking was aligned with the truth, then he would have made the right choices, because he would not even really have had any challenge or struggle with something, because all he has to remember is that there's no power other than God Almighty, and God Almighty is in every instant infusing him with the power to make the right choice. So therefore, what do you need to do? What does each one of us need to do? We need to know that the chet, the sin, or the avera, the transgression, right? The word, it's interesting, the word in English for transgression is talking about also going over. To transgress means to go over to something else. So what have we to learn from this? That what is that thought? That's the spirit of folly. That you have a thought that I'm going to have a piece of chocolate cake that I'm not supposed to have. That's not any big unusual thing. We all have thoughts going through our head all the time that have no positive benefit. But we could ignore those thoughts. We can let those thoughts go. We can know that those thoughts have no hold on us. There's no, it's like if an airplane flies through the sky, and today is Wednesday, and there's an airplane that flies through the sky with a big sign that says, today is Thursday, you would just ignore it. You're not going to pay any attention to a sign that says today is Thursday, if today's Wednesday. It's foolish. It's silly. It has no significance whatsoever. Now imagine, so that's what happens when you have a thought come through your head to have a piece of chocolate cake, to do something that you know you're not supposed to do. Or now that doing something you know you're not supposed to do could be saying the wrong thing, speaking the wrong thing, acting the wrong thing, not doing something you're supposed to do. You know it's right for you to do. So now imagine, however, you're standing out here, it's Wednesday, you look up at the sky and you see a plane goes by and it says today's Thursday, and you're like, uh-oh, maybe I got the day wrong. Maybe today's not really Wednesday. Maybe today's really Thursday. I don't know how to resolve this. And I got a sneaking suspicion that today could be Thursday. There's a plane that says that this is a serious thing. Planes that go through the sky telling us what day it is, they have power. My whole world's changed now. It's not Wednesday, it's really Thursday. What happened to Wednesday? I don't know. I missed Wednesday. Now I'm in the middle of Thursday. I should be doing something else now. All of a sudden, you're doing the Thursday things instead of the Wednesday things. What's happened? You lost your own center. You knew today was Wednesday, but now all of a sudden you're like, this plane is pretty convincing. Looks pretty powerful to me. Looks pretty like, come on, someone put up a plane with a sign. Why would they put up a plane on a Wednesday that says Thursday? It must really be Thursday. And on and on and on. So what have you done? You've just taken your certainty or your divine certainty, knowing that God Almighty is taking care of you, and you've just given over, you created the possibility that there's something else in the world. This thought came through your head and you're like, oh, that's a serious thought. Let me entertain that thought a little bit. And you're like, I can't believe I'm entertaining that thought. What kind of person am I? Now you're thinking about the thought, and then you're thinking about how am I going to get that, how am I going to fulfill the thing I'm thinking about? So what's really happened over here is the spirit of folly. The spirit of folly, people think, oh, the spirit of folly is the person went and ate that chocolate cake. How? That's such a foolish thing to do. That's not where the foolishness is. The foolishness is in the moment of thinking that there's anything in the world that could possibly take him off track from serving God Almighty. When he fails to, for that moment, fails to see that God Almighty is infusing him with the power and the ability through his soul to be able to do the right thing every moment and every time, then he is not going to be swayed. He's not going to give it any place. It's going to be like any place to this possibility. That thought's going to come through his head, and it's going to be like, well, let's go on to the next thought. He's not even going to think about the fact that he had the thought. And what does it mean that he had the thought? And all that kind of stuff that gets us down, which is part of the process of the spirit of folly. Starting to think that somehow there's something wrong with us because we had a stray thought go through our head. As soon as we realize, oh my gosh, this is not a thought I should be thinking about, then you let it go. So the spirit of folly is what the Torah is teaching us over here, that in this case, specifically referring, the word is used in reference to a woman who's conducting herself in a way that's not in comporting with her obligations to her marital obligation to her husband, then and even it may not even be doing something that's actually committing adultery, but she's spending time chatting with a guy that she's not supposed to be chatting with, and she's doing it in a way that she's secluded with him, so it could lead other people to think the possibility that she's not doing and conducting herself properly. Where does this come from? It comes from a foolishness in her thinking. And her thinking is that she can, she's lost sight of the reality, which is that God Almighty is giving her the strength that she does not have to do this. She could just stay the steady course of what she is meant to be doing, which is obviously being loyal to her husband as is required of her. So also one of the points to bring out over here is that this is an extremely unusual and kind of this, what we're going to talk about here is unusual and tragic circumstance. I mean, really, a marriage that's on proper footing would never have the requirement for such a suspicion, because a husband is advised that the sages advise a husband that he should assume that his wife is always innocent of any wrongdoing unless they have some clear justification to suspect otherwise. And even if he has a cause, he's convinced there's a cause for concern, his first responsibility is to speak to her privately to improve her behavior. So, and even then, if that doesn't work, but he can only proceed with this process of the Saita if he's sure that his motivations are pure. He's not because he's just joking around or because he's angry or he's trying to scare her. All that's not allowed at all. And also the husband himself has to have proper conduct. He cannot be unfaithful to his wife and then try to make her go through this process. And it also has to be in a society where society would be outraged and appalled by infidelity. So if in a situation, even in the times of the Mishnah 2,000 years ago, when the moral standards were declining, then already this process was discontinued because the society as a whole was not outraged by infidelity. Just 1 second, I'm going to mute for a second. 851. So we're here. On chapter 5. We're talking about the situation where if a wife is suspected of adultery, then a husband has to warn her. And first of all, he's not supposed to suspect her. Then he has to warn her privately. And then if that doesn't work, then he's sure that there's possibly infidelity and that he's also himself conducting himself properly. Then there's a whole process here that's described of how this water is taken and a piece of paper with parchment with God's name is put on it, and she has to take an oath that she's been faithful, and if she is really, really guilty, has been unfaithful to her husband. Now, this is obviously a case where there's no witnesses. If there's witnesses, if it's known that she was unfaithful to her husband, and she was warned, and there was witnesses and so forth, then that's already taken care of, because it's a capital crime for a person to commit adultery. But here's a situation where the husband just has some uneasy feelings because he sees that she's chatting with some guy, and then she's like in a secluded place with him, and so he's starting to feel that maybe she's not being faithful. So then this is a process that reveals the truth. And basically what happens if she really has been unfaithful, then she will die. And if she has not been unfaithful, then she will be absolved of any accusations. So this is what is being discussed in chapter 5. Now, in chapter 6 is a status that a person can take upon himself to become a Nazir. A Nazir is in English is called a Nazirite. And there's been certain great people throughout history that, I've heard of Samson. Samson was someone in the Bible. He had like really long hair. He was very, very strong, very powerful. Samson, you might have heard of Samson and Delilah. Samson, so he was a Nazir. He was a Nazirite, and he's not allowed to drink any wine or any grape products. He can't grow his hair. He can't cut his hair. He cannot come in contact with the dead. And this is a voluntary status that a person can take on themselves to, sort of part of the process of improving their relationship with God Almighty. Now on page 859, or a little bit 859, we have over here the beautiful priestly blessings. So over here it says, the end of chapter 6 in verse 22, and then going to verse 23, that he commanded the Kohanim. The Kohanim are the priests. So among the Jewish people are associated the priests unto the nation. And then in the Jewish people, there's the Kohanim, they're the priests, and their job is to do the service in the Holy Temple. And their job is also to bless. And it says over here in verse 22 that this is how you must bless the Israelites. And then it has the blessing, the actual blessing. And we say this is the Kohanim, the priests in our time, still give this blessing on the holidays. And in some communities, they give it actually at every morning prayer. So it says on the top of 859, may God bless you and watch over you. May God shine his face to you and endow you with grace. May God be partial towards you and grant you peace. So this is a very, very powerful blessing. And the Kohanim, the priests, are given the ability to be able to give this blessing to people. And it's a very, very powerful blessing. And actually, there's formal times that they're told to do it. And also, let's say at a wedding and stuff like that, the priests will bless the bride and the groom. Okay, and then continues from there. There's different offerings that were brought when the temple was being inaugurated, the tabernacle was being inaugurated. So then the pages continue over here. We'll see that going from here until from chapter 7 all the way through to page 869 is the offerings that were brought by the leaders of each tribe at the inauguration of the tabernacle. And then at the end, it continues and says over here, that talks of the total of all the offerings that were brought by these 12 leaders of the tribes. And that is the end of the Torah portion for Parshas Naso.
This is similar to the Bible, right?
This is the Bible,
This is the Bible,
the original and only.
the only Bible.
Right.
So-
This is the way God spoke it. Here's the original Hebrew that God Almighty spoke to Moses and the Jewish people on Mount Sinai,
Alright.
and he told Moses to write it down.
So they have some of the same stories or all of the same stories. It's just different in the Bible a little bit. Well,
Well, so
This
in
is
the
the
in the
original.
Torah, this is the original. Yeah, in the Torah, this is here is the 5 books of Moses
Mhm.
over here.
the Old Testament, right?
Yeah, but we don't call it the Old Testament because we don't believe there's a New Testament.
All right.
But over here, this here has the 24 books. There's the 5 books of Moses, and then after the 5 books of Moses, that's what's called the that's why I said the 5 books of Moses. And then after that comes the prophets. So that you've probably heard of some: Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and then there's the 12 prophets: Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi.
So before it was 12, it was 7 prophets.
So these are here. Yeah. So these are this is Joshua. It's called, these are all called the prophets, but these are the book of Judges. These okay, books of Judges and Joshua and Kings and Samuel, Kings. Isaiah is the first one here that is a prophet. There were other prophets part of that, but the first book named after a prophet. And then there's the 12 prophets here. And then continues over here. We have the writings, what are called the Ksuvim. And here you have, so the book of Psalms, Proverbs, Job, book Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and the Chronicles. So these all together, that's 24 books. And these 24 books this is the Torah.
That's the original, right?
Right. Any question online? Let's see here, someone asked a question. Keep coming up with questions, Jay. So if someone asked the question, here's a concept within Torah similar to this explanation with the Seder that relates to the wife suspecting the husband or any instruction or advice in other place what should be done. So there is no process. There's no process of the Seder for a husband. And, in such a situation, she should definitely also, if she suspects her husband, she should speak up and try to also improve her husband's ways. Any other questions?
Would that say you catch your significant other in the act? Is that a good enough reason to divorce or not?
So a woman who's been, you have to speak to a competent rabbi at the time. God forbid such something that could happen. But if someone was to actually know and catch a person, then for the wife is not allowed to be married, to have relations with another man while she is married to her husband. So if he catches her like that, then there's a problem for him to remain married to her.
So is fantasizing about another person other than your spouse, that's also like a sin?
Yes, the person shouldn't do that. And there's a couple of reasons for that.
But
Because
it's not physical.
it's not physical, right? So when it's okay, so what is a sin, right? So sin is when we're using our energy in a way that we shouldn't be using it. So in the Torah, it says you can't be with a person who's not your spouse, right? You can't just go around and take a woman off this, that's not, you can't rape a woman, God forbid. Can't be with a woman who's forbidden to you. Can't be with a mother, sister, aunt, and so forth. Those are all forbidden relations. Now, but the thing is now that a person has a wife, all his energy, all his reproductive energy should be devoted to her.
Mhm.
One of the things it says in the Code of Jewish Law, when it talks about how a husband is supposed to conduct himself in marital relations, he's not supposed to be thinking about any other woman. He should be thinking about his wife, right? That's what he is. He's now in a relationship with her. He can't be thinking about her, and he shouldn't be thinking about anyone else at other times also. Good question.
I know I read some of the Bible. I know I read some of the New Testament, but I think my mom used to read me most of the Old Testament. But I feel like it's better I could understand it better with the New Testament than the Old.
What do you find better, easier to understand?
It's like the writing, like how you write, how they speak.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like I guess the Old Testament is the native tongue, is how they used to talk. So certain things I've cut, like they die or I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what they be saying. I read the Bible.
But you said you don't think there's a New Testament.
No, because there's a testament means a covenant. So there's one covenant that God has with all mankind. And then he established that covenant with Adam when Adam was created, the first man. He has reestablished that covenant with Noah when Noah came off the ark after the flood. And he established that doesn't change. And he established the covenant with the Jewish people and also with all the nations of the world on Mount Sinai. That's what we were just celebrating on this past Sunday and Monday. So God Almighty is giving instructions and loving guidance to every single human being on Mount Sinai. There's no room for another covenant. Okay, so we're gonna. You can keep thinking of questions. I'm gonna pause this. Okay, so we will reconvene, God willing, next week. Thank you all.